what's something I haven't done for a while? Hot takes. So that's what we're doing. I asked you guys on the YouTube community tab this time, so let's see if these takes are better or worse than what we normally get from Twitter. I guess we'll find out. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. The top voted take out of all of this is the kit system isn't bad in concept, as it prevents people from creating an ultra mega uber broken metacomp. The real issue is the slow rate they're coming out and no third kits. I half agree with this. I think if the kit system had more kits and a faster output, it would probably be a lot more serviceable, and I don't think people would mind it as much. But I still think the kit system itself is bad, and I still think as games continue, we're going to need more and more of them for it to be sufficient. Back in Splatoon 2, when I did my custom versus set kit concept, 3 kits for every weapon won the poll for pre-launch Splatoon 3. With more subs, mains, and specials, it would probably be like 4 to 5 kits. At some point, it seems to be out of the realm of feasibility, in which that's where I'd argue we need a system change. Omega Legend says stage reworks of bad stages to make them decent or okay is better than making good stages great, at least when reaching a wider audience, as it helps people consider what options they want to try. So this is probably referencing my usual take that I think it's better they rework stages that are already good, and yeah, that's fair. My personal perspective is the kind of mediocre stages are things I still tend to want to avoid. Like a reworked Eel Tail of the quality of Undertow would still be something I never want to play, whereas a reworked version of something like Umami might actually get me to get on the game. But I can totally see the perspective of having more stages at a decent level would probably be better for the average player. And part of this could also be my bias to tournament map lists that would benefit a lot more from more good stages. The Potion Master says Side Order should have come out at the end of Splatoon 3's life cycle. It would have given it more time in the oven and more opportunity for improvements. Honestly, I disagree. I think that Side Order came out too late, and I think that's part of why I don't think it's been getting as much attention as something like Octo Expansion. Octo Expansion was only around a year after the game came out, and that meant that a lot more people still had interest in Splatoon. It being a year and a half later already, let alone the possibility of it happening even further in the future, I think would just hurt the game. Could it have used more time in the oven? Absolutely, that would have resulted in a better product, but I don't know if it would have been better for what the game needed, and considering it's $25 paid DLC, it probably needs to be doing a bit better than it is right now. Bucket Bard says Big Run should happen way more often. It's less of a gameplay change-up than Splatfest, but at least with Splatfest there's a community aspect and interesting stakes. The fact that we only get Big Run once a season is crazy when Splatfest happen about every month. I mean, I think it's fair. Splatfests are a lot more of a main event, but I personally like Big Run more. So I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to Big Run happening more often. Ballpoint meta was the golden age meta of Splatoon 3. Specifically, there's a sweet spot right when Ballpoint got toned back a little bit, but before Zuka got buffed, I think that was peak meta. Absolutely. That little sweet spot, those few weeks were really, really good. It toned back exactly what made Ballpoint meta annoying without taking it out of the meta entirely yet. I would absolutely go back to that if I could. Goomba's in a Stack says Splatoon should become more physics-based. I want to get momentum from swimming down slopes and then use it to squid roll further. Honestly, I think more expansions to the movement system could be a good idea, but the system is also so refined as it is that you'd have to be really careful with it. For example, I think if they slowed your speed going up slopes, that could be a negative change that would unfairly bias the defending team given how a lot of the maps are laid out, or potentially create more snowballs for attackers on stuff like Flounder. So you'd have to be really careful with what exactly you allow people to do. This isn't a hot take at all, but I included it anyway because I agree with it. Crowboy says that Splatoon speedrunning deserves more recognition. They're friendly and constantly trying to push the series. Yeah, it does. Go watch some Splatoon speedrunners if you haven't already. Muffin King says that curling bombs are underappreciated as a bomb instead of a movement tool. I agree. We've seen more curling bombs with stuff like 52 Deco, Heavy Edit Splatling, or Roller, and seeing them charge up curling a little bit more definitely gave it a lot more utility as a bomb. I think it's a bit better, though it could also be partially due to the buff it got with the ink efficiency. That helped a lot more than I think it was given credit for. Birdbrain says Splatoon doesn't need any new weapon classes. 11 is plenty, and I feel like many ideas would either be too similar to other weapons or too weird. Tri-Stringer is a good example. I love stringers though. I don't know, I feel Tri-Stringer is pretty distinct. I don't really agree with this take honestly, because I feel like a lot of the new weapons of the same classes are getting more similar. We have a lot of hybrid weapon class ideas here, which I could see getting stale if they continued that in Splatoon 4. So if anything, I think the new weapon classes have felt the most distinct. Napkin Dictator says, I believe Splatoon would be a much better game if every basic shooter weapon were gone. More unique ones like dualies or H3 can stay, but having generic guns with a high fire rate and completely oppressive turf output makes all of the weapons weapons way worse. I don't agree that it makes them way worse, but I do agree that Splatoon could be a lot more interesting when those weapons aren't good. In fact, we have a very mid-range oriented meta right now, and part of why I think people like that is a lot of non-shooter weapons and relegates the shooters to typically one weapon in a team comp, which has made things more interesting. Mid-range metas tend to be really well liked outside of the part where they gave all of them damage up in Splatoon 2. Maybe that'll be a topic for its own video. Let me know if you guys want to see me talk about why a lot of comp players like mid-range metas and the weapons involved in them. Shadow TD says, hot take, bad weapon kits doesn't mean there are bad weapons, but there are untapped potential that the pros don't see because they think there's only one way to play a weapon. I'm sorry, this take is like horribly outdated. First off, I don't get the take that pro players don't see potential in other weapons. There are a lot of good players in West or Japan that have experimented with weaker weapons. I could use myself as an example, but you can even find cases like some top JP players that use a weapon as bad as Big Swig Roller in Area Cup. Japan in general has a lot of one tricks that push specific weapons solo and comp-wise, but the other part of this I don't like is people thinking there's only one way to play a weapon. Top players in this game are incredibly flexible. In the support role, I think Bursty is one of the best examples. He's played A-Tree, Zap, Kent's Undercover Umbrella, in this game plays Pencil, has rotated off a cooler armor weapon entirely with Splash. He's played a bunch of different stuff. You have players like Ice who have transferred from frontline support and backline while being at the top of the game in multiple different weapons. And there's plenty of notable players, especially in Japan, who have pushed less conventional weapons anyway. Top players tend to be some of the most flexible ones in the game, and part of the reason top players are the best at their weapons is because they know how to play it in multiple different ways. That's part of what makes them good. I feel like this perspective comes from a place of seeing a lot of top teams in tournaments, but not seeing what a lot of top teams and players do behind the scenes, which is fair, a lot of that isn't even streamed. But as someone who is present behind the scenes, I promise you there is a lot more talk and experimentation than you actually see. The reason you don't see a lot of it in tournament is, well, a lot of it doesn't actually work. And the occasional stuff you see that does work is where you get stuff like World Champs, where you saw Reflux, Wiper, and Dynamo on Flounder zones. And World Champs just reminds me that Jackpot was flexible enough to get Madness to play Pencil and try Nouveau as a frontline player, which is just another example of what I've already been talking about. Beckett says Zones is the worst mode. It has the playstyle of just play around mid the whole time and doesn't allow use for the map outside of mid because the objective is stationary, which favors weapons with good paint and restricts weapon choices. I completely disagree with this. Weapons like Bucket are weak paint, but their best mode is probably Zones. Blasters have weak paint, and its second best mode is Zones outside of tower control. Vanilla Roller has weak paint, and Zones is also its best mode. Tower control prioritizes killing and area of effect weapons. Rainmaker prioritizes speed and damage, and Clam Blitz prioritizes speed and flexibility. In Zones, the objective is the least demanding out of all of them. Most of the match is spent not looking at the zone at all, but fighting outside of it, which means a lot of weapons' unique strengths and traits get to shine. Do paint weapons still get some form of advantage? Yeah, of course. Stuff like Junior is way better on Zones than it is on the other modes because it can paint the zone well. But to pretend like that makes a bunch of other weapons unviable is far from the truth. At the same time, people do not play in the zone for the obvious reason that if specials can be used on you and also hit the objective, it's generally a downside. This is a case for all other modes, but Zones tends to be the only one to get this typical stereotype. People tend to fight off of the zone and utilize either the sides of the map or fighting in front of it because it is more powerful in Zones. Having it so that people have to look away from the zone is one of the most important things about that mode. Outside of the objective being stationary, I think all of these arguments are actually inverted in favor of Zones. Scary Green Mountain says, while pushing non-meta / mid-tier weapons can offer advantages such as unpredictable playstyle or unique comps, it'll save you a lot of effort and frustration to just stick to the meta. Using high-tier weapons also makes it a lot easier to mesh with other players, since it's pretty much always better to use what has been proven strong if you want to perform better competitively. I partially agree with this. I think what's really important right now is using weapons that you're mechanically good at, but yeah, this is true for any game. Playing a weapon that is going to be really strong is what matters most. That's how I've factored in my weapons. I'm best at blasters, so I play blasters, but I also don't play all of them. I pick the ones that are actually good, and that's found me the most success. For some players, it's worth it to push a mid or low tier weapon. Maybe it works well with their team or their individual playstyle, but the majority of the time, it's just easier to pick a top tier. Banana says, I feel like people over-exaggerate how bad the balance of the game is. These things only really apply once you fight the top of players. That doesn't mean that the balance of the game doesn't have problems, but also, yeah, this is right. I still see people who are like mid, higher, low level complaining about things that do not apply to them. Just look at what wins low ink, for example. You can see practically anything there, and that's still a pretty decently high skill level to win a low ink. Zekers says Sploosh is a better carbon. It's faster, deals more consistent damage without a windup, has a special that better synergizes with its playstyle, and paints way better. Carbon requires burst bombs to function and make up for its range and inconsistency with awful paint. Honestly, to me, it kind of depends on the meta. Like in late Splatoon 2, Sploosh was the better pick, and the recent shot size buff has helped its consistency a lot. I think Sploosh tends to be a bit less comp dependent, and on specific maps, especially in Rainmaker where its DPS and speed get to shine the most, sees a good bit of use. Though admittedly, I would say that Carbon is still a decent bit better right now, especially considering its kit has one of the best subs and the best special in the game at its disposal. It's something that I think the Sploosh 7 in Splatoon 2 did a little bit better of a job at. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see Sploosh, particularly if there's a small buff to Curling or Hammer. I think in Rainmaker especially, it's a bit underrated. We'll have to see what people do with it. Oh, by the way, thanks for creating Lethal Company. That game's pretty cool. Chada said, "What's good? Thumbnail guy here. This is my take. Splatoon 3 gotta be the most frustrating and disappointing game in the series. And if you want the extended cut, here's the rest of this comment." I gotta agree with this. Frustrating is kind of the perfect term for how a lot of fumbles in the game feel like. We know this could be so much better than it is right now. Splatoon 3 has had more potential than Splatoon 1 and 2 by a mile, and you know, it's just not quite there yet. I hope it gets fixed, honestly. I really want to see what this game could be like with another year of content and a bit better updates. But with that being said, that is all my hot takes for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.